hang-ups and these habits, these things that have hurt me and the things that I can't get over, these hang-ups and these habits that I'm stuck in. He said, but David says that in Psalm 34, he said that many are the afflictions of the righteous. Now, he says not everybody has afflictions, but he's talking specifically about the righteous, the one who are in relationship in God's citizenship of peace. He said, many are your afflictions. He says, but you're not stuck in the many. It don't matter how many. He said, but God delivers them from them all. That word delivers means that God snatches them out of them all. Come here for a second. You can't be snatched out of something you can get yourself out of. In order for you to need to be snatched out, it means that it's got a grip on you. As they used to say, they got their hooks. You got their hooks in me. God has to snatch you out of what has its hooks in you. What is it has its hooks in you? Because this is what Paul is telling us, that this citizenship of peace is meant to snatch you out of what has its hooks in you. The hellish horizontal in your life that has its hooks in you. And how does that happen? Paul says in Philippians 4:11 in that area, he had learned the secret of being content. He learned how to do well in prosperity with much, and he learned how to do well with little. But then he goes on to the famous verse of 4:13, I can do all things in Christ who strengthens me. Paul says that when we quote that verse, it's not necessarily this verse of me gaining superhuman strength. He's saying that the superhuman spiritual strength that I have is to be content, satisfied, to understand that grace is sufficient, and no matter whatever is happening for me or against me. He said, whatever seems undone and whatever is done, I've learned the mystery, what's a mystery, now the secret, meaning the thing that has been whispered about that everybody don't know, I know. Paul says today, do you know that the citizenship of peace is your secret to being satisfied, understanding that grace in Christ, through Christ, is enough to keep you no matter what's going on? Because he says the peace of God will guard your hearts, will protect your hearts and your mind. Your hearts and your mind. Because the reality is that we're too attached to some things that are affecting us and infecting us more than we know. It's like the ships that are tied to the port, what they call the mooring lines or the ropes that you see when you dock at a port. There's this silver things, if you've seen them, that are clipped up on the lines, those lines that are made by hemp, if you will. And it's these metal things that are made because they're slippery and you can't really get any kind of suction or grip onto. But those things are called rat guards. Rat guards. Rat guards meaning that oftentimes they've come to find that when ships will dock at ports, rats that are in their environment will crawl up the lines to try to board the ship and make the journey as stowaways on the passage. The reality is that we're too connected to some things and we don't realize that there are rats crawling into the things that we're attached to, and they become stowaways in our lives. But Paul said this peace of God is the rat guard that will guard your hearts and your mind. There's some stinking thinking going on in your head right now that because you are attached to too many things and you have not considered why you got off the boat to go enjoy the amenities as a tourist. You didn't realize that everything at an environment is not just for your pleasure, but there are some things that are rodentary existence in your life that are meant to bring in pestilences and diseases and kill you from the inside out while you're on the journey. And you can't understand why your thinking is so messed up and why you're so angry and why you're complaining and why you're so discouraged and why you're so hopeless, because the reality is that you've attached yourself to something and you were only focused on what you can get, what you can go out to, and you wasn't focused on what was coming in. You wasn't focused on what was coming in. And Christ said, you need to get the rat guard. So even while it's crawling up, it can't gain traction to get into the ship of your voyage. You need to grab that peace of God, so much so that when you put the rat guard up, it says in verse 8, 9, and 10 in that area, he says that the God of peace will be with you. He switches the word. He says the wholeness, harmony, and well-being of God will protect you. He said, but don't you get caught up on the resource. He said, but if you keep thinking right, put your mind on what's holy and what's true, change your stinking thinking to what's godly, you start transforming your mind, Romans 12 and 2. Do not be conformed by the ways of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You will be able to test and believe and see what the acceptable, holy will of God is. And when you do that, what will happen is God will not just dispatch his peace, he will mess around and walk himself into your environment, because it says the God of peace will be with you. The God of peace will be with you. If you will focus on being a citizen of peace, God's grace is sufficient. It's sufficient. No matter if they're not heavenly connected to the vertical, if they're more hellish in your horizontal, God's peace will be a preventer and cut them off and plug the hole of the hell that's in your life right now. He will cut it off right then. Because God is always your first line of defense.